Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Sunday celebration. My name is Reverend Ron Fox, and welcome to the Center for Spiritual Living, Space Coast. And I'd like to begin by just saying, if you've never been to a Center for Spiritual Living before, we believe there's one God, many paths to that God, and we're here to love, honor, and support you, no matter what your divine path is. And the Center for Spiritual Living, Space Coast is a safe haven for people of all beliefs and lifestyles, whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on your journey of faith, you're welcome here. And now to begin our service, my wife Becky is going to open us with a prayer, and then Barbara Loftus, one of our congregants, is going to do a spiritual reading.
Okay, so I just invite everybody to turn within to that quiet place, to the place of the Most High. It is this place where each one of us can experience this infinite love, this infinite power and presence. It is all that we are. Each one of us is the very expression of this wonderful divine power. And as we open up our hearts and our minds, allowing it to express through us, we express our thoughts so easily and clearly this morning. This morning's message that is given by Reverend Dr. Ron is also heard and heartfelt. It touches each one of us. It allows our thoughts, it allows our emotions, it allows everything to be expressed right here, right now. That each one of us is directed and guided into being the very divine expressions of spirit. And so we allow ourselves to surrender into this power, to surrender ourselves, our egos, into this divine expression. And so knowing that everything is all good and in divine right order, I let it go. I let this prayer go into the law and the love. And I just say, thank you, Spirit. And so it is.
So it is.
So Reverend Ron said this was a spiritual reading, and spirit can take many forms, so I will let the listener judge the form this spiritual reading is taking. The old man lay sprawled across 3 entire seats in a theater. When the usher came by and noticed this, he whispered to the old man, "Sorry, sir, but you're only allowed 1 seat." The old man groaned but didn't budge. The usher became more impatient. "Sir, if you don't get up from there, I'm going to have to call the manager." Once again, the old man just groaned. The usher marched briskly back up the aisle, and in a moment he returned with the manager. Together, the two of them tried repeatedly to move the old, disheveled man, but with no success. Finally, they summoned the police. The officer surveyed the situation briefly, then asked, "All right, buddy, what's your name?" "Fred," the old man moaned. "Where are you from, Fred?" asked the police officer. With terrible pain in his voice and without moving a muscle, Fred replied, "The balcony."
Well, I thought that was a spiritual reading in tune with what I'm going to talk about, because things aren't as they appear, right? So the title of the message today is Looking Beyond Things as They Are. And I want to begin, Becky and I have a banner in the entryway of our house, and I would like to just read to you what it says. It says, "What happens to you does not matter. What you become through those experiences is all that is significant. This is the true meaning of life. So I want to begin this morning with a quote from Ernest Holmes from this thing called You. And Ernest wrote, "Faith can make you whole. Faith can convert fear into certainty, poverty into riches, disease into health. Faith can lift you from a valley of despair into a mountain of hope and certainty." And that too really speaks to what I want to speak to this morning. And so I want to begin with a story that Rachel Remen wrote. And she tells a story that her grandfather was a rabbi. And it's really interesting because her parents were atheists, but her grandfather was a rabbi. And when she was a little girl, he used to sit her on her lap and they would have these wonderful conversations. And along the way, he bought her a thimble-sized goblet that if she got restless, he would pour a little Manischewitz into her little goblet and she would have a sip of wine. And he taught her a toast. And the toast was simply l'chaim. And that means to life. So when he taught it to her and he said l'chaim, to life, she said to him, "Does that mean to a happy life?" And he said, "No, just to life." And she said, "Is it a prayer?" And he said, "No, we pray for things we don't have, and we already have life." And she said to him, "Is it in the Bible?" And he said, "No, it's in our hearts." And he said, what it means is that no matter what difficulty life brings us, no matter how hard or how painful or how unfair life is holy and worth celebration. And he said, even the wine is sweet to remind us that life is a blessing. And Rachel went on to write, she said in the years she counsels people with serious illnesses. And so she wrote, in the years that she has been counseling people with cancer, she's seen people choose life over and over again, despite loss, despite pain, and despite difficulty. She said, the joy that was in her grandfather's eyes is in all of them. I read an article this week about the late Ram Dass. And many of you might know Ram, near the end of his life, he had a stroke. And he didn't write the article I wrote, but the person that wrote it said that Ram, he knew Ram, and Ram said that one of the things that the stroke did, he couldn't enjoy two of the things he really loved doing. And one of them, it was driving. And the other one, which kind of surprised me, was playing golf. I just never saw Ram Dass as a golfer. But anyway, driving and golf were two of the things he loved to do that he couldn't do anymore. And he realized it brought him down initially. And he realized that if he clung to the old identity that he had, he would suffer. When he did that, he suffered. And so he worked his way through his fear of aging. And actually, because of the stroke, it brought him closer to God. And he said that gratitude in the darkest of times is more than remembering our blessings. But we can learn and we can see that suffering deepens us, that suffering matures our perspectives on life, and it makes us more compassionate. And so I'm going to probably ask this question in different ways this morning. but how many lessons have you learned from unwanted challenges? And a while back, I read a quote by a lady named Dana Falls, and she wrote, "It took years for me to realize that the very twists and turns and shadows that I labeled as problems were really sacred ground." So last week, I spoke a little bit about writings from Rabbi Harold Kushner, and I want to go back and do some more this week because he writes on what I'm speaking about very eloquently. And in one of his books, he asks the question, what does a person do when their dreams don't come true? What does a person do when their dreams don't come true? And he said, some hold on and don't see themselves as failures, and others let themselves be defined as failures. And for me personally, I think one of the best examples of this that I've heard is about two women, each of whom suffers a tragedy. Each of their sons were killed by a drunk driver. One of the women went into despair and became a drug addict. The other one started Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, MAD. Kushner goes on and asks, how do you find the will to go on when your life isn't the one that you'd been looking forward to? And he said, the question isn't, can I get through life without some failures? Because you can't. You can't. He said, the real question is, how do you respond? Where can you find the courage to go on? We can see that if we fail at one thing, it doesn't mean that we fail as people. Our worth isn't determined by how much we have in our bank account. It's determined by our humanity, by our compassion, by our courage to keep on dreaming, no matter what happens to us. What matters most is, what do we do about what happens to us? So I was reading something this week about a gentleman named James Costello. And James was a victim of the Boston Marathon bombing. And he was severely injured. And he claims that it was the worst moment of his life. And he also says he wouldn't trade it for anything. So you can ask, why not? And the answer is, because of that, he met his future bride, the love of his life. And you know, sometimes in life, the best comes out of the worst. When I read that the best can come out of the worst, in my own personal story, I know that's true because when I got divorced, I thought it was the end of life, and it wound up being the beginning of my growing and learning and winding up with the lady by my side here. And when my job got eliminated at Mattel, again, I thought, oh my God, we're going to be homeless. And I wound up starting my own business and doing better than I had ever done. And the truth is, happiness is a choice, even when bad stuff is happening. And so again, I'm going to do this question in a different way. Where have you found gold in a bad situation? Where have you found gold in a bad situation? And what has a negative experience taught you? So in the book, Encouraging Words, that we've been using in our book group before the book group had to go on hiatus, there's a quote in there. By the way, Dennis Merritt Jones wrote the book. And here's a quote in there from Robert Fulghum that I'd like to read to you. And the quote is, "One of life's best coping mechanisms is to know the difference between an inconvenience and a problem. If you break your neck, if you have nothing to eat, if your house is on fire, then you've got a problem. Everything else is an inconvenience. Life is inconvenient. Life is lumpy. A lump in the oatmeal, a lump in the throat, and a lump on the breast are not the same kind of lump. One needs to learn the difference." You know, there's a Buddhist proverb that says, "The obstacle is the path." And what they're saying is, the meaning is when there's an obstacle, don't go around it. Don't run from it. Go into it. Work with it. Explore it. Learn how to be with it and how to deal with it. And you'll find out that you've developed a skill for life. Rhonda Byrne, who wrote The Secret, wrote a column for the Huffington Post several years ago. And I want to share some part of it with you. So she said, every mistake is a blessing in disguise. And she said, children make mistakes all the time. You know, think about it. Children, how many times do they flop when they're learning how to walk? Or how many times do they fall when they're learning how to ride a bike? Or when they're learning how to read, or they're learning how to write? And she says, and people don't give it a second thought when that happens. So why are we so hard on ourselves as adults? And she said, if we don't make mistakes, we don't learn. But to learn from them, we need to own them. And all too often, rather than owning our mistakes, we look to blame somebody else. And when we blame, we don't learn. And when we don't learn, we keep on making the same mistakes over and over again. And how do we learn? We learn with gratitude. No matter what is going on, we have so much to be grateful for. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? What are the good things that can come from this? One of my favorite quotes is by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "'Tis not in the high stars alone, nor in the cup of budding flowers, nor in the redbreast's mellow turn, nor in the bow that shines in flowers, but in the mud and scum of things, there always something shines." So I want to tell you another Zen story. I think I've talked about this sometime before, but a king feels like his people are maybe getting a little lazy, and so he wants to test them. So he has a giant boulder placed on the only road that leads into his city, and then he hides to see what happens. And what happens is all kinds of people come and see the boulder, and in one way or another, they use it as an excuse not to go to work. Well, can't get around the boulder, can't go in to town, can't go to work. I might as well go home. And that's what they do. And finally, an old man comes, and he too sees the boulder, and somehow he strains and strains and strains and works up enough power that the boulder moves aside. And when it does, he sees a big bag of gold under the boulder, and there's a note. And the note reads, "This gold is for you, since you know that a great obstacle can lead to bigger opportunities." And the moral of it is that the easy way isn't always the best way. Obstacles give us the opportunity to grow and to develop. Challenges, troubles, problems, failures, and mistakes all give us the opportunity to be more. And so another question we can ask ourselves is, how far are you willing to go to overcome an obstacle in your life? How far are you willing to go to overcome an obstacle in your life? So one last article that I read this week was by a fellow named Matthew Trinetti. And the title of the article was 10 Reasons to Love Obstacles. So I'm not going to do all 10, but I do want to highlight 4 of the reasons we can love an obstacle. And the first one is obstacles show us who we really are. Obstacles show us who we really are. And he said we can learn about ourselves through our worst moments. He said when we're lonely, when we're sad, when we're in times of heartbreak, they force us to feel. And when we feel, they expose our deepest core. And once we see our darkest demons, we can begin to learn how to deal with them. And a second reason he said we can learn to love obstacles is obstacles make us tougher. They give us a chance to practice courage, to improve ourselves, and to forge a steel backbone. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I did a quote where the person said, we never know how much courage we have until courage is the only option. And that's kind of the same thing that he was saying. And the third reason is they help us focus on what's important in our life. And the last one I want to talk about is obstacles give us the opportunity to change for the better. He said tragedy can give us the impetus to make big changes in our life, and they help us reassess our existence. So I want to close. I read something this week that really moved me, and it's a little too long to do the entire thing right now, but I do want to read a part of it, and I'll wait till the end to tell you who wrote this, because I think it might surprise you. So here's what the author said. Remember to spend some time with your loved ones, because they're not going to be around forever. Remember, say a kind word to someone who looks up to you in awe, because that little person will soon grow up and leave your side. Remember to give a warm hug to the one next to you, because that is the only treasure you can give with your heart, and it doesn't cost a cent. Remember to say, I love you, to your partner and your loved ones, but most of all, mean it. A kiss and an embrace will mend a hurt when it comes from deep inside you. Remember to hold hands and cherish the moment, for someday that person will not be there again. Give time to love, give time to speak, and give time to share the precious thoughts in your mind. And always remember, life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by those moments that take our breath away. George Carlin wrote that. Thank you for being here this morning. God bless you, and have a great week.